Men like you should not have checks worth millions. With that cold sentence, spoken with the certainty of someone who believed his prejudice was sound judgment. Richard Harrington reached forward, snatched the $2.22 million dividend check from Nathan Brooks's hand, and tore it cleanly down the center. The sharp rip echoed across the marble floor. The torn halves fluttered downward, landing at Nathan's feet like discarded proof of his dignity. A few customers gasped. Phones were raised, and in that single violent gesture, meant to assert control, Harrington unknowingly set fire to his own future. The humiliation he intended for Nathan would soon return to end his career, his reputation, and the comfortable certainty he thought could never be challenged. Before we go deeper into this story, where are you watching from? Please subscribe to the channel and give me a like, because what happened next reveals truths that matter for every one of us. Nathan Brooks entered the Midtown branch of National Trust Bank with quiet confidence, dressed in dark jeans, a gray hoodie, and clean sneakers. He carried the simple white envelope that held his quarterly dividend check, a number he no longer thought much about but always treated with respect. He believed wealth was not measured by clothing but by discipline, character, and purpose. Nathan made it a personal practice, every quarter, to visit the bank dressed as an ordinary customer. He did this not for amusement, but for awareness. He wanted to see whether the institution he owned upheld the values it promised. On this afternoon, that test revealed far more than he anticipated. When he first walked through the glass doors, Vanessa Ortiz, the assistant manager, greeted him with steady warmth. She was professional, kind, and consistent, treating each customer with the same courtesy. She offered to help him with private service, but Nathan declined with a polite smile. He wanted to stand in line like everyone else. She accepted his choice without question and returned to her tasks. For a moment, the visit felt like any other. There was nothing unusual in the air. There was no sign of the hostility waiting to rise. Everything shifted the moment the branch manager heard the amount written on the check. Richard Harrington approached with a rigid posture and a narrowing expression. He did not introduce himself. He did not acknowledge Vanessa. He moved as though he were responding to a threat rather than assisting a customer. His voice, cool and clipped, repeated that the bank had to be careful with unusually large transactions. Nathan explained he understood and offered additional identification. He remained calm, steady, and respectful. Yet each piece of information he provided seemed only to deepen Harrington's suspicion. Margaret Peggy Whitmore, a wealthy customer with a reputation for making her opinions public, stood nearby watching closely. Her voice carried easily across the lobby. She spoke of people trying to act wealthy and individuals who do not belong in certain places. Her comments were not whispered. They were delivered with intention, meant to influence the room and affirm her belief in a divide she thought was natural. A few customers looked down, uncomfortable. Others pretended not to hear, but a handful raised their phones, sensing that something troubling was unfolding. Brian Keller, the security guard, stepped closer with one hand resting on his duty radio. His body language conveyed suspicion rather than readiness to protect. Nathan recognized the posture. It was the same stance he had seen in airports when traveling in casual clothes. The same stance he had seen when he first entered military training years ago. The same stance he had seen in stores where assumptions outweighed fairness. He breathed slowly, steadying himself with the patience he had learned long ago. His phone buzzed. Bob Callahan, the bank president and an old business school friend, was calling with a reminder about their upcoming board meeting. Nathan stepped slightly aside, answered briefly, and assured Bob he would join on time. It was a calm exchange, the kind that reflected long-standing trust and mutual respect. When he ended the call and returned to the counter, Harrington's expression hardened even more. The manager asked for further identification. Nathan provided it, He asked for additional verification. Nathan complied. He asked for the check's origin. Nathan explained. Each answer was met with deeper doubt. Finally, Nathan suggested the simplest solution. He asked that the check be verified through the bank's internal ownership system. It was a direct request, made with quiet confidence. Harrington refused. He said he trusted his instincts more than any system. His instincts, shaped by long-held assumptions, had already convicted Nathan without evidence. Vanessa attempted to intervene. She spoke calmly, reminding Harrington that proper verification protocols existed for a reason. He cut her off sharply. He insisted that he alone would handle the situation. She stepped back, frustrated but unable to change the path the manager had chosen. Customers watched with growing discomfort. Some shook their heads, some whispered among themselves, a few activated their cameras. The tension became a presence in the room, heavy and unmistakable. Nathan tried once more. He explained patiently who he was and offered to open the bank's internal app on his tablet. Harrington refused before Nathan even finished the sentence. He accused Nathan of attempting to deceive the bank. He said the transaction felt dangerous. He used the word suspicious again and again. And then, with a sudden motion born of arrogance and indignation, he reached out and tore the check. He did it not as a procedure, but as a punishment. He believed he was destroying something fraudulent. Instead, he was destroying the facade of fairness he believed he upheld. Nathan felt the sting of humiliation. It was sharp, unexpected, and painfully familiar. The pieces at his feet represented not just money, but judgment. Yet he did not react with anger. He stood still, breathing with the discipline of a man who had risen above far greater challenges. He understood that the moment, though painful, carried possibility. His silence unsettled the room. Peggy smirked. Brian watched closely, ready to intervene. Harrington stepped back, convinced he had done something righteous. Nathan looked down at the torn halves of the check, then looked up with a calmness that startled everyone. He understood something that Harrington did not. This moment, meant to shame him, was the moment that would expose everything: the prejudice, the arrogance, the careless abuse of authority. The cameras were recording, the witnesses were present, and though Harrington believed he had asserted control, he had in truth revealed a deeper truth to the world. Nathan stood alone in a crowded room, but he stood with dignity. Harrington stood with authority, but he stood on the edge of ruin, and the consequences that would soon follow had already begun to take shape. Richard Harrington believed his authority was absolute when he tore the check, but his arrogance had only begun to reveal itself. He stared at the torn pieces on the marble floor and repeated that the bank would not tolerate fraud. Then, as if performing for an audience, he reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a small silver lighter. His voice rose in a tone that carried false courage as he declared he would destroy this false evidence to protect the institution. Without hesitation, he flicked the flame and touched it to the first torn half. Fire spread quickly across the paper. The bright blue edge curled inward, then burst into orange as the check transformed into a burning symbol of prejudice. He dropped the flame onto the second half, letting both pieces fall to the floor as ashes scattered across the polished stone. Customers gasped. Some stepped back. Several phones lifted higher, capturing every moment as the smoke drifted upward. In that single reckless act, Harrington crossed a line no manager could defend. He believed he was delivering justice. In truth, he was destroying his own credibility in front of countless witnesses. Peggy Whitmore clapped her hands softly, praising him for his bravery. Brian Keller folded his arms and stepped forward as if protecting the branch from an imagined threat. Nathan Brooks remained silent. His dignity stood taller than the flames that had just consumed the check. The humiliation was real, but so was his resolve. He understood that patience, not anger, would reveal the truth to the world. Mia Park, a young customer seated near the deposit counters, felt her pulse rise as she watched the scene unfold. She had come in to complete a small business transfer. Now she found herself witnessing an act she knew the world needed to see. She opened Instagram Live with trembling fingers. Her voice held controlled emotion as she narrated the burning of the check. Viewers appeared instantly, dozens, then hundreds. Her comments were clear, precise, and factual. She knew the importance of accuracy. She understood that stories of injustice required truth, not exaggeration. Her camera captured the scattered ashes, the flame in Harrington's hand, and the calm restraint in Nathan's posture. More viewers joined as notifications spread. The live stream continued to rise, standing several feet away. Ethan Rivera, a college student with a passion for documenting real-life events, raised his phone to record in high definition. He knew the moment mattered. He zoomed in on Harrington's face, capturing his expression of self-righteous pride. He recorded Peggy's delighted reaction and Brian's stance of intimidation. He recorded Nathan's quiet strength. Ethan switched to TikTok, knowing the speed of that platform would spread the story even faster. His audience grew with every passing second. Near the exit, Mrs. Rosa Henderson, a 72-year-old black woman with a cane and the quiet authority of someone who had lived through the civil rights movement, raised her voice with a calm but unwavering tone. She declared that what she was witnessing was discrimination, plain and simple. Her words carried experience, not anger. They carried truth, not accusation. Customers turned to listen. Some nodded. A few grew uncomfortable. Her presence brought gravity to the moment. She knew injustice when she saw it. She had fought it her entire life. She refused to stand silent as another generation endured what she had endured decades ago. Dr. Lauren Mitchell, a physician who had become accustomed to subtle prejudice in many parts of her daily life, stepped forward with measured composure. She asked Harrington why he had refused to verify the check through official channels. She asked why he had escalated the situation instead of following protocol. Her questions were calm but precise. They exposed the cracks in his justification. Harrington ignored her. His refusal to answer made the silence between each question heavier. It revealed concerns he could not hide and assumptions he could not defend. Amit Shah, a business owner who had remained neutral during the early moments, now felt compelled to speak. He expressed his shock at the manager's actions and his concern for the bank's reputation. He reminded the room that fairness should be the foundation of financial institutions. His voice carried reason, and his steady tone encouraged others to speak. Customers who had remained quiet now whispered among themselves. What had started as a single confrontation had become a public reckoning. More phones appeared. More cameras recorded. The story was no longer contained. It was expanding. Vanessa Ortiz stepped forward with courage despite Harrington's earlier dismissal. She attempted once more to bring order and reason. She stated that burning the check violated every protocol the bank had established. She explained that he should have followed verification procedures. She reminded him that emotional decisions could not replace documented processes. Her voice shook slightly, but her resolve did not. Harrington turned sharply toward her and demanded that she step back and let him handle the threat. The phrase struck Nathan, the witnesses, and even some staff members with its unmistakable implication. Threat. It was a word used too often without cause, a word that carried danger when spoken in the wrong hands. The tension in the lobby deepened. The smell of burning paper lingered in the air. Thin trails of gray ash floated across the marble. The scene had become a stage, and every person present played a part. The number of viewers on Mia's live stream climbed from hundreds to thousands. Comments poured in, expressing disbelief, outrage, and prayers for calm resolution. People online urged her to keep recording. They urged her to stay safe. They urged her to document everything. Ethan's TikTok feed surged. The online audience doubled, then tripled. What had happened in a single branch in Midtown Manhattan was spreading to living rooms, offices, classrooms, and phones across the country. Nathan remained still. His silence was not passive. It was deliberate. He had learned in the Air Force that a calm mind could navigate storms better than a loud voice. He understood that reacting with anger would only confirm the false assumptions others had already formed. He also understood that justice, when approached with discipline, had greater impact. He watched the ashes at his feet and recognized their symbolism. They represented the assumptions of others, not his worth. They represented prejudice, not truth. And he knew that the truth would soon emerge with undeniable clarity. Harrington, however, saw none of this. He believed he was controlling the narrative. He believed he had demonstrated strength. He believed the customers would respect him for protecting the bank. Yet every expression in the room, every camera pointed at him, every quiet whisper, and every rising number on social media told a different story. He had not protected anything. He had exposed everything, and the consequences of his decisions, though invisible to him now, were already forming beyond his control. The ashes continued to drift in small circles on the floor. Nathan lifted his gaze toward Harrington with calm composure and spoke a single sentence that held unwavering confidence. He said that truth did not burn. Those nearby felt the weight of those words. They sensed the shift. They sensed that this moment, captured from every angle, was no longer in Harrington's hands. It was in the hands of those who witnessed it, both in the room and across the country. Richard Harrington believed he had done the noble thing by burning the check. But his certainty began to crumble the moment he dialed 911 and reported a dangerous fraud suspect refusing to comply. His voice carried false urgency as he described Nathan Brooks as uncooperative and threatening, adding words that had not happened, shaping a narrative meant to justify his own misconduct. Beside him, Brian Keller nodded with exaggerated seriousness, repeating details that turned suspicion into accusation. Peggy Whitmore stood with a hand on her chest, claiming she felt unsafe. Their voices merged into a picture they crafted together, a picture meant to portray Nathan as a risk. But the cameras had already recorded the truth, and thousands of viewers online knew the report was built on falsehood. Inside the branch, customers watched anxiously. Some whispered prayers, some kept filming. Others moved toward the exits, afraid of what would happen when the police arrived. Nathan stood still, dignified, and deeply aware that the next few minutes could determine the course of his safety and the outcome of the entire confrontation. The arrival of the New York Police Department was swift. Officers Carla Morales and Darnell Washington stepped through the doors with disciplined precision, following protocol and responding with seriousness to what they believed was an urgent threat. Harrington rushed toward them, pointing at Nathan with the desperation of someone who feared losing control. He repeated his claim that Nathan was attempting a large-scale fraud and had resisted instructions. Brian stepped forward to add weight to the report, stating that Nathan had acted aggressively. Peggy, consumed by self-righteous confidence, declared that she had feared for her life. The officers listened, but their eyes were already assessing the room. They saw the raised phones. They saw the ashes on the floor. They saw Nathan standing completely still, his hands visible, his posture calm. Yet protocol required immediate action. Their duty was to neutralize the situation based on the call they received. Their training demanded caution. In a moment that silenced the entire lobby, both officers placed their hands on their holsters. Carla called out to Nathan with firm authority, instructing him not to move. Darnell instructed him to keep his hands fully visible. They approached with deliberate steps. The weight of the moment settled heavily on everyone present. Customers stopped breathing. Phones stayed lifted but trembled in nervous hands. Mia Park whispered softly into her live stream that police had arrived with weapons drawn. Her voice was steady, but fear underlined every word. Viewers poured into the feed, the total count rising from thousands to tens of thousands. Ethan recorded every second, refusing to miss a single detail. He knew how quickly moments like this could be twisted if not documented with precision. Nathan raised his hands slowly, his movements measured, controlled, and guided by years of military training. He addressed the officers with calm clarity. He stated that he would comply with every instruction. He spoke with a tone that carried respect, not fear. Yet the sight of him standing with his hands raised shook those watching. They understood the danger. They understood the risk. They understood how easily a false report could escalate into tragedy. Carla pulled out her handcuffs. She moved forward. She instructed Nathan to turn around. She instructed him to place his hands behind his back. He obeyed without hesitation. The cuffs tightened around his wrists. The sound of metal locking echoed through the lobby. The humiliation he felt was sharp but contained. He remained steady. His voice remained calm. His dignity remained intact. Darnell watched closely. Something in the scene troubled him deeply. The room did not reflect the chaos described in the report. He saw customers who looked horrified, not endangered. He saw employees who seemed shaken, not threatened. He saw a manager who appeared defensive, not credible. His instincts, shaped by years of experience and personal understanding of racial bias, began to question everything he had been told. He lowered his hand from his holster. His voice softened as he asked Nathan for identification. Nathan nodded calmly and said that his identification was in his front pocket. Darnell asked for permission to retrieve it. Nathan granted permission with quiet respect. The officer reached into the pocket and pulled out an ID card with the name Nathan Brooks printed clearly. He read the title beneath the name: Chairman of Brooks Capital Partners, majority shareholder of National Trust Bank. His expression shifted. His breath caught. He knew exactly what this meant. Carla, still holding the other side of the report in her mind, asked Nathan whether he could verify his identity further. Nathan, still handcuffed, requested to reach for the tablet in his messenger bag. Carla hesitated. Darnell stepped forward and offered to retrieve it. Nathan agreed. Darnell unzipped the bag with careful movements, removed the tablet, and handed it to Nathan. Nathan unlocked it with facial recognition. He opened the bank's internal ownership system. The screen showed his profile, his shareholder status, his board role, and his position as the top controlling entity of the institution. Darnell stared at the information with disbelief. Carla looked over his shoulder and took a step back, her face paling. She realized the magnitude of the mistake. Darnell spoke first. His voice was calm but heavy with apology. He stated that they had acted on a false report. Carla followed, acknowledging the error, without delay. Darnell removed the handcuffs. The click of release carried profound meaning. Nathan rubbed his wrists briefly but remained composed. He did not raise his voice. He did not express anger. He simply stated that he understood their duty and appreciated their professionalism once the truth became clear. His grace in that moment left a deep impression on both officers. Around them, witnesses exhaled in relief. Mrs. Henderson wiped a tear from her eye. "Doctor," Mitchell placed a hand over her heart. Amit Shah shook his head in disbelief. Peggy lowered her eyes without speaking. Harrington stepped back with visible fear. Brian folded his arms tightly, trying to mask his concern. The room understood that the narrative had shifted completely. The truth was undeniable. Mia narrated the moment to her growing audience. The number of viewers surpassed 30,000. Comments flooded the screen. People expressed outrage. People expressed relief. People expressed gratitude that Nathan had remained safe. The live feed captured the officer's apologies, the torn ashes on the floor, and the visible collapse of Harrington's confidence. Ethan recorded with precision, knowing this footage would become vital evidence for the world to see. The scene held a solemn stillness. Nathan looked down at the ashes of the check, then looked back at Harrington with quiet authority. He stated that truth revealed itself when given the chance. His words carried the weight of lived experience. They carried the weight of dignity reclaimed. They carried the weight of a moment that would soon transform from injustice to accountability. Harrington, who had believed he controlled the narrative, now understood that he had lost control completely. His decision to call the police, his choice to exaggerate details, and his reckless act of burning the check were no longer private actions. They were evidence, they were recorded, they were seen by thousands, and the consequences of his choices stood before him. The moment did not end with anger. It ended with clarity. The officers stood by Nathan with respect. The customers stood with him in solidarity. The cameras continued to record. And the truth, now undeniable, prepared the way for the reversal that would follow, where justice would begin to take its rightful place. The moment the handcuffs came off, the atmosphere inside the branch shifted with a clarity no one could ignore. Silence filled the lobby as Nathan Brooks straightened his posture, rubbed his wrists once, and looked directly at the man who had accused him, humiliated him, and burned his check in public. Richard Harrington stood frozen, his confidence drained, his face pale, and his composure fractured. He had believed he held authority. He had believed he controlled the narrative. But now he was facing the man who owned the majority of the institution. The man whose status was confirmed by the officers themselves. The man whose dignity had remained unbroken through every moment of injustice. Nathan did not raise his voice. He did not speak with anger. His calm tone carried more strength than any shout could. He said that truth had been revealed and that accountability must follow. The cameras were still recording. The phones were still lifted. The live stream was still growing. Every person in the room understood that the balance of power had reversed completely. Officer Darnell Washington stood at Nathan's side, no longer as an enforcer but as a witness to the truth. Officer Carla Morales remained near the counter, her expression solemn as she absorbed the severity of the false report. She knew that this moment would require transparency on her part and detailed documentation on the official record. She knew it mattered. She knew every step needed to honor the truth. Meanwhile, Mia Park continued broadcasting with careful narration, capturing Nathan's steady composure and Harrington's unraveling certainty. The viewer count rose beyond 50,000. Comments appeared faster than she could read them. People wanted justice. People wanted answers. People wanted to see what Nathan would do next. Jessica Walsh, a reporter with the New York Daily News, arrived within minutes of the unfolding event. She walked directly to the edge of the crowd, her notepad ready, her posture alert. She asked bystanders for statements. She asked who had recorded what. She asked for the timeline. Her questions were respectful but firm. She understood that fairness required careful reporting. She approached Nathan and requested a brief comment. He thanked her for arriving quickly, but asked her to wait until he addressed the matter formally. She respected the request and stepped aside, observing everything with measured patience. At that moment, Nathan's tablet buzzed. A video call request appeared on the screen. Bob Callahan, the president of National Trust Bank, waited on the other side. Nathan accepted the call. Bob's face appeared, filled with concern and urgency. His voice, steady but serious, asked Nathan if he was unharmed. Nathan responded that he was safe. The crowd listened in stunned silence as Bob confirmed Nathan's identity, not only as a board member but as the chairman and controlling shareholder of the bank. Bob expressed disbelief at what he had been told and assured Nathan that immediate action would be taken. The confirmation from the highest executive voice in the institution removed any remaining doubt. Harrington's expression collapsed completely. Peggy took a step back. Brian lowered his eyes. The truth had become undeniable. Nathan ended the call and turned toward Harrington with the authoritative calm of someone who understood both justice and mercy. He said that Harrington's actions had violated policy, violated ethics, and violated the dignity of a customer. He said that burning a check, refusing verification procedures, filing a false police report, and escalating a situation without cause were not errors of judgment, but deliberate abuses of power. Harrington tried to speak, but only fragments of sentences emerged. He attempted to explain. He attempted to defend himself. He attempted to shift blame, but the words would not form. His voice faltered under the weight of the truth. Nathan raised his hand slightly to stop the attempted excuses. His tone remained even. He said there were only two options before Harrington, and they were not negotiable. The first option was to give a public apology, accept immediate termination, pay $40,000 in restitution for damages, and face the legal consequences through civil action. The second option was to resign on the spot and accept that the incident would be referred for criminal review. The terms were clear. The consequences were inevitable. The witnesses listened with quiet attention. The cameras captured every word. Nathan did not threaten. He did not scold. He simply stated the reality with measured authority. Harrington's hands trembled. His breath grew uneven. He looked around, searching for support from those who had encouraged him only minutes earlier. But Peggy stood still and silent, her face void of the confidence she once displayed. Brian avoided eye contact, aware that his role in the escalation would soon be examined. No one stepped forward to defend the manager. No one spoke on his behalf. He was alone with the choices he had created. Finally, his shoulders slumped. His voice cracked as he whispered that he would accept the first option. Nathan instructed him to deliver the apology publicly, in front of the cameras, in front of the customers, and in front of the officers. Harrington nodded with visible fear. He stepped forward, facing the crowd, his expression drawn with humiliation. His voice shook as he apologized to Nathan, to the customers, and to the employees. He acknowledged his wrongdoing. He admitted he had ignored protocol and acted on assumptions. He admitted he had escalated the situation without cause. His words carried no pride, only the weight of consequences he could no longer avoid. The apology was recorded from multiple angles. The live stream captured every syllable. The nation watched in real time as a manager confronted the cost of prejudice. Peggy and Brian stood behind him, both visibly shaken. Neither spoke. Neither defended themselves. They understood that their own consequences awaited them. Vanessa Ortiz approached Nathan with gratitude in her eyes, thanking him for his patience, his dignity, and his leadership. Nathan responded with kindness, acknowledging her integrity and professionalism. He recognized that she had tried to uphold fairness, even when her voice was silenced. Her efforts had not gone unnoticed. Jessica Walsh stepped forward again and asked Nathan whether he was ready to speak. He nodded. He addressed the room with calm strength. He said that dignity could not be torn, could not be burned, and could not be erased by prejudice. He said the truth had revealed itself because cameras had captured what words alone could not convey. He said accountability did not require anger, but required clarity, courage, and steadfast commitment to what was right. His words resonated through the room with quiet power. The moment marked the beginning of a transformation that would soon reshape the entire bank. The reversal was complete. The truth had prevailed. Justice had taken its rightful place. The lobby remained silent after the apology. But Nathan Brooks understood that personal justice alone could not heal the deeper wound revealed in the branch that afternoon. The torn check lay in ashes on the marble floor. Customers still held up their phones. The officers stood watchfully at the edge of the crowd. Vanessa Ortiz waited for guidance, and Nathan knew this moment could not end with a single termination or a single apology. It needed to become something larger. It needed to become a turning point. He stepped forward, centered himself in the room, and spoke with the measured calm of someone who had long carried the weight of responsibility. He said that what had happened was not only the result of one man's choices, but the product of a system that allowed bias, assumptions, and unchecked authority to influence decisions that affected the dignity of customers. He said that if the bank expected to regain trust, it needed a new structure, one that actively prevented this type of injustice from happening again. Every face turned toward him, some with shame, some with hope, some with cautious optimism. He continued with a clarity that left no room for confusion or resistance. He said that effective immediately. He would implement a nationwide reform throughout National Trust Bank, a reform known as the Equity First Protocol. He explained that it was not a slogan. It was not a temporary project. It was a permanent system of accountability designed to address the roots of discrimination. It would apply to every branch, every employee, and every manager. Regardless of rank or tenure, no one would be exempt. The protocol would begin with mandatory quarterly bias training focused on real scenarios, real consequences, and real accountability. It would address both subtle and overt prejudice. It would include role-based evaluations to ensure employees understood not only procedures, but the ethical standards required of them. He continued with the second component. He said that every branch would install an independent camera oversight network monitored by a third-party contractor, not by internal staff. The cameras would provide neutral documentation of interactions between staff and customers. They would protect customers from mistreatment and protect employees from false accusations. The footage would be reviewed randomly each quarter to ensure compliance with policy. It would create transparency without fear. It would create documentation without bias. It would create consistency that could not be manipulated or ignored. The third component involved communication. Nathan explained that the bank would establish an anonymous feedback channel that reported directly to the board's oversight committee. Employees could report concerns. Customers could share experiences. Community partners could raise issues. The reports would bypass local managers entirely. This step would close the gap that allowed misconduct to be hidden or minimized. It would empower those who often felt unheard. It would give the board the information needed to make informed decisions rooted in truth, not filtered accounts. The fourth component completed the structure. Nathan announced the formation of community advisory councils at each major branch. The councils would include local leaders, business owners, activists, clergy, educators, and long-term customers. They would meet quarterly with senior management to discuss patterns, concerns, and opportunities for improvement. They would provide real voices from real communities. They would give people a seat at the table. They would ensure that each branch was accountable to the community it served, not just to internal metrics or financial goals. The bank would not only hear from the public, but engage with them directly in shaping better policies. As Nathan outlined each element, the room listened with complete attention. The officers nodded thoughtfully. Customers watched with quiet approval. Those recording began typing comments praising the plan. Jessica Walsh wrote quickly, recognizing the significance of what she was witnessing. She understood that she was not documenting a routine confrontation. She was documenting the birth of a national reform movement. The social media viewers commented rapidly. They wrote about leadership. They wrote about dignity. They wrote about change. The viewer count continued to rise. When Nathan finished outlining the core protocol, he turned to Vanessa Ortiz. He acknowledged her integrity, her courage to speak even when dismissed, and her consistent professionalism in the face of hostility. He said that she would be responsible for coordinating the initial implementation of the Equity First Protocol at the Midtown branch. Vanessa's eyes filled with emotion. She stepped forward with gratitude, but also with the weight of responsibility. She understood the significance of what he was entrusting to her. She accepted the role with humility and a quiet promise to uphold the values he had articulated. Mrs. Rosa Henderson nodded approvingly from her seat, with the voice of experience. She said loudly enough for all to hear that change did not happen by accident. It required intention. It required courage. It required leadership. She praised Nathan for turning humiliation into progress. Her words resonated through the room with the power of a generation that had endured battles for equality. They carried a reminder that progress was not given, but earned. Dr. Lauren Mitchell stepped forward next. She thanked Nathan for his clarity and his commitment. She said that she had experienced discrimination in many settings, including financial institutions, and that the Equity First Protocol represented a step toward restoring trust. Her words were steady, but the emotion beneath them was unmistakable. She understood the impact of this moment. She understood that this change extended beyond Nathan and beyond the branch. It reached into the experiences of countless people who had faced subtle prejudice throughout their lives. Amit Shah, still processing the events he had witnessed, expressed support for the reforms. He said that he planned to move all his business accounts to National Trust Bank because he believed in leadership that valued people as much as profit. His statement created a ripple of approval across the room. Customers nodded. The officers exchanged brief glances of respect. Even those who had doubted the power of reform now recognized its potential. Jessica stepped forward and asked Nathan whether he intended to make a formal public statement. He said that he would. He said that transparency mattered. He said that the public had seen the injustice unfold in real time and deserved to see the resolution as well. He said that the bank would not hide behind prepared statements or vague language. It would speak openly. It would acknowledge failure. It would commit to repair. As he finished speaking, the ashes of the burned check remained at his feet, but they no longer represented humiliation. They represented transition. They represented the moment when personal dignity became public reform. They represented the shift from an isolated incident to institutional transformation. The room held a sense of solemn purpose as Nathan stepped back. He had not raised his voice. He had not shown anger. He had shown leadership. He had shown clarity. He had shown the capacity to turn harm into progress. 6 months passed, and the events of that Tuesday afternoon no longer lived only in recordings or witness accounts. They lived in consequences, documented publicly, measured carefully, and felt personally by every individual involved. Nathan Brooks had never sought revenge, but accountability had unfolded with clarity and precision. The Equity First Protocol had already taken root across National Trust Bank. Branches implemented new training. Independent camera networks became standard. Advisory councils met each quarter. The institution Nathan helped build was transforming in ways rooted in dignity, fairness, and responsibility. Yet the people whose actions had ignited the crisis faced journeys marked by reckoning. Their lives changed, not through anger from Nathan, but through the outcome of their own choices. Richard Harrington's fall was swift and absolute. After the day of the incident, he was placed on administrative leave pending formal review. The review examined every second of footage from the live streams, every witness statement, every procedural violation, and every decision he made that afternoon. His employment was terminated with cause. His annual salary of $105,819 vanished instantly. His benefits ended. His reputation collapsed. Prospective employers requested references, and he could provide none that carried weight after the misconduct report was filed. The civil lawsuit that followed required him to pay $50,000 in settlement for damages, including the destruction of the check and the pain caused by his false accusations. Friends who once praised his leadership became distant. Professional colleagues avoided association. He applied for jobs in smaller financial institutions, hoping for a second chance. But each background check revealed what had been recorded online. He could not escape the truth. The incident marked the end of his career in finance. The authority he once exercised with certainty became a memory he revisited with regret, and the ashes he had burned became the symbol of the credibility he had destroyed. Peggy Whitmore's consequences followed a different path, shaped by reputation rather than employment. Her comments from that afternoon resurfaced across social media, her disdainful tone, her dismissive statements, and her applause for the burning of the check appeared in countless reposts. Invitations to social circles she once moved through with ease were revoked quietly but firmly. Fundraisers she attended as a guest of honor no longer extended invitations. The private clubs she frequented requested that she step back from her memberships. Her name became associated with prejudice rather than philanthropy. The bank banned her from all branches, citing behavior that endangered customer dignity and public order. A judge later ordered her to complete 150 hours of community service at a civil rights center in Harlem. There, she faced history she had once ignored, the first-hand stories of discrimination, resilience, and struggle forced her to confront what she had contributed to. Each hour of service required reflection. Each conversation reminded her that arrogance had blinded her. She had not expected accountability. She had believed her status would protect her. But the world had changed. Silence no longer shielded wrongdoing, and her future depended on whether she learned from the past she had once dismissed. Brian Keller, the security guard who once stood with confidence and intimidation, faced consequences that reached into both his present and his past. His employment was terminated immediately after the investigation concluded. The bank revoked his security license for failing to follow protocol and contributing to the escalation. When the renewed internal review of his former New York Police Department conduct opened, additional concerns resurfaced. The inquiry revealed patterns of behavior marked by assumptions rather than evidence. The review board required him to complete anti-bias training in order to remain eligible for future security work. He faced the reality that authority required discipline, not impulse. It demanded fairness, not force. Without those qualities, he could not regain the trust required to serve in any protective role. The uniform he once wore became a reminder of the responsibilities he had failed to uphold, while the antagonists faced consequences. Those who had acted with courage and integrity experienced growth and recognition. Nathan did not allow the burned check to become a symbol of loss. Instead, he transformed it into opportunity. He established a scholarship fund named the Brooks Dignity Fellowship, seeded with the full value of the destroyed check. The fellowship supported students from underserved communities pursuing careers in finance, law, and public service. Nathan believed that the greatest lesson from that day was not the humiliation he endured, but the power of education to create change. The scholarship applications poured in from across the country. Recipients wrote to Nathan expressing gratitude, determination, and hope. The burned check, once meant to shame him, became a foundation for nurturing the next generation of leaders. Vanessa Ortiz, whose professionalism had been ignored in the moment of crisis, rose through the ranks with steady grace. Nathan advocated for her advancement. Recognizing her courage and integrity, she was promoted to branch manager of the Midtown location. Under her leadership, the branch transformed into a model of equity and accountability. Employees respected her, customers trusted her, advisory councils praised her efforts. She felt the weight of responsibility, but she carried it with humility and strength. Her promotion was not a reward for witnessing injustice. It was recognition of her consistent professionalism and her unwavering commitment to fairness. Mia Park, whose live stream captured the truth as it unfolded, became a prominent advocate for justice. Her follower count grew to 500,000. She used her platform to promote awareness, dignity, and accountability across industries. Invitations arrived from universities and community organizations asking her to speak about the power of recording truth, the importance of courage in moments of injustice, and the role of social media in shaping public understanding. She accepted each invitation with gratitude, always reminding her audiences that she did not seek fame. She sought fairness. She believed in truth, and she believed that silence allowed injustice to flourish. Officer Darnell Washington received commendation for his integrity and discernment. His willingness to question a false narrative and his commitment to truth earned him recognition within the department. Officer Carla Morales submitted a detailed report acknowledging the error and outlining the lessons learned. She completed advanced training and became an advocate within the department for improved verification protocols. She understood that accountability strengthened trust, not weakened it. As for Nathan, he continued leading with dignity. He remained calm, deliberate, and unwavering in his belief that justice required steady guidance rather than retaliation. The banking institution he controlled became stronger because he chose reform over retribution. His team treated the Equity First protocol not as a temporary program, but as a permanent foundation for fairness. He understood that leadership was not measured by wealth or position. It was measured by the willingness to transform harm into healing. The consequences of that afternoon touched each person differently. For some, they brought humility. For others, growth. For a few, irreversible downfall. But for Nathan, they brought clarity. They confirmed that dignity, once upheld with resolve, had the power to reshape institutions, redirect lives, and redefine what fairness meant in a world still learning to overcome its assumptions. 6 months after the incident, the clip of the burning check no longer lived only as a moment of shock. It had grown into a national reflection. Mia Park's live stream, combined with Ethan Rivera's detailed recordings, surpassed 12 million views across platforms. People watched it in classrooms, at community centers, in financial institutions, and in corporate training sessions. The hashtags equity in banking and ashes of assumption appeared not as trends, but as markers of a wider movement toward fairness. Universities used the footage as case material for ethics courses. Nonprofits included it in workshops on systemic bias. Banks, both large and small, quietly adopted versions of the Equity First protocol, recognizing that transparency and accountability were not just moral imperatives, but essential components of trust. National Trust Bank, once shaken by scandal, now became a model for the industry. Under Nathan Brooks's leadership, the institution reported a 15% increase in minority customers and a measurable rise in community engagement. The public responded not because of marketing or public relations, but because they saw genuine change rooted in dignity. The bank's internal culture shifted, shaped by employees who took the reform seriously and by managers who understood that ethical conduct was no longer optional. In the center of the Midtown branch, a small glass case was installed. Inside it rested the surviving ashes of the $2.22 million check. The ashes sat on a piece of black velvet under a brass plaque engraved with the words, "The Cost of Assumptions." Customers paused before it each day. Employees walked past it as a reminder of what had happened and what must never happen again. The case was not a monument to humiliation. It was a symbol of transformation. It was a reminder that dignity could rise even from the remnants of injustice. Nathan Brooks traveled frequently across the country to speak at universities, financial conferences, and community forums in each place. He delivered the same message. He reminded people that wealth, status, and appearance do not define worth. He reminded them that respect should never be determined by clothing, skin color, or preconceived notions. His speeches were calm, measured, and thoughtful. He spoke with pauses that allowed each word to settle into the listener's mind. He shared that the moment Harrington tore the check was painful, but the pain had purpose. It exposed a truth that many wanted to ignore. It revealed the power of perception. It showed how quickly bias could turn an ordinary transaction into a crisis. And yet, he explained that the real lesson was not in the act of tearing or burning the check. The real lesson was in what followed. He told audiences that they could not control the actions of others, but they could control how they responded. He insisted that dignity was not destroyed by disrespect. It was affirmed by calm strength. He repeated the same 5 lessons wherever he went, believing they carried permanent value. He said that dignity was not found in clothing, wealth, or social status. It lived in how people chose to behave. He said that power should not be used for revenge. True power transformed pain into progress. He said that systemic change began with one person willing to speak up and a community willing to listen. He said that ashes did not represent endings. They represented new beginnings. They represented the chance to rebuild something better. He said that every person had a role in shaping justice. People could remain silent. They could enable wrongdoing, or they could become part of the solution. He encouraged audiences to choose the path of courage and compassion, even when confronted with hostility. His speeches resonated deeply with those who had faced prejudice. They provided clarity for those who had participated in bias without awareness. They offered hope for those who believed change was possible, but had never seen it in action. Inside the Midtown branch, employees still paused when passing the glass case. Some reflected on their own assumptions. Some considered the possibility of unconscious bias in their daily interactions. Some reminded themselves that professionalism required humility and awareness. Vanessa Ortiz, now the branch manager, often walked by the case at closing time. She remembered the day she had been silenced by her supervisor. She remembered the fear she felt when the situation escalated beyond control. But she also remembered Nathan's calm strength and his belief in her integrity. She used those memories as guidance in her leadership. Under her management, the branch no longer measured success only by financial performance. It measured success by fairness in service, by respect between employees, and by trust built with customers. Her team learned to ask questions before making judgments. They learned to listen before reacting. They learned that professionalism required more than procedure. It required character for those who had harmed Nathan. The memory of that day did not fade easily. Harrington lived with the consequences of his actions. Each time he searched for employment, the incident appeared in the background check or in the questions employers posed. Peggy completed her community service quietly. The conversations she heard at the Harlem Center stayed with her long after her required hours ended. Brian attended the mandatory training sessions, confronted his past decisions, and entered a period of self-reflection he had once avoided. Whether these individuals grew from the experience depended on their willingness to face discomfort and examine their own beliefs. Some embraced the opportunity for change, others struggled, but the world around them moved forward, shaped by the lessons they had unintentionally delivered. Mia Park continued her advocacy, reminding her audience that recording injustice was not a spectacle, but a responsibility. Her platform became a place for education rather than outrage. She collaborated with community leaders and produced content focused on fairness, dignity, and accountability. Ethan Rivera, still a student, found his footage used in training programs across the country. He realized the weight of his decision to record that afternoon. His importance lay not in capturing drama, but in preserving truth. Nathan never claimed to be a hero. He spoke of the day as a painful reminder of how far society still had to go. But he also spoke of it as proof of how powerful one moment of patience and clarity could be. He often told audiences that people could burn paper, but they could not burn dignity. They could doubt someone's worth, but they could not erase the truth of who that person was. He said that leadership was not the ability to win a confrontation. It was the ability to turn humiliation into healing. He ended every speech with a reflection that became his signature message. He said that if a single burned check could change an entire banking system, then a single act of kindness, a single fair decision, a single moment of courage from any person in the room could change someone else's life. He reminded listeners that change did not come from institutions alone. It came from individuals willing to pause, to reflect, and to choose dignity. The glass case remained in the lobby, illuminated softly by overhead lights. People approached it with quiet respect. They read the plaque, studied the ashes, and contemplated the meaning behind them. It was not a symbol of conflict. It was a reminder of human worth. It represented the moment when an institution confronted its own assumptions and chose transformation, and each day, someone paused before it, lifted their head, and walked away, determined to become a better version of themselves. Thank you for watching this story. If you found meaning in it, please take a moment to subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with someone who may need its message today. Your support helps these stories reach more people.